From Leo Tolstoy to Mark Twain. This is Talking of Books, in association with Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, only on Dubai Eye 103.8.
And welcome back to Talking of Books. This last hour is our Young Readers slot, and some of you may remember earlier in the year we had a wonderful programme with Rohan Roberts and two of his students. Rohan has very kindly agreed to come back again today with two more students, Faiza Syed and Mehvash Khan, and they're going to talk to us about a book by Peter Diamandis called Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think. So, over to you, Rohan.
Right, so the book is called Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think, and it's by Peter Diamandis, who is a molecular biologist and CEO of the X Prize Foundation. He's also the co-founder of the Singularity University and the International Space University. The book offers the reader an exhilarating overview of how rapid progress in the fields of genetics, nanotechnology, robotics, and other exponentially growing technologies will usher in an age of abundance, and how we will see more gains in the next 2 decades than we've seen in the last 200 years. So the book is packed full of optimistic ideas and solid evidence to convince even the most jaded reader to be sanguine about the future. If you think about it, we've made so much progress in the last 100 years or so. We've made massive progress in the fields of education, technology, communication. We're living longer, healthier, safer lives than ever before in the history of our species. So the underlying theme of the book is that scarcity is contextual and technology is a resource-liberating mechanism. So to use a metaphor, the solution to scarcity is not to slice the pie thinner, but to make more pies.
That's a good reference. So how do we make more pies?
Well, Faiza, do you want to...
I'd just like to add to what he said, really. Of course, we have to acknowledge that we do have our set of problems, but at the end of the day, we need to realize that we will knock them down. And this book gives you, like he said, factual evidence that we can do this, and that we have been doing this over the past few decades, and that we will continue to do this with the use of rapidly growing technology. And really, that is the resource liberating force, and that's how we'll make more pies.
So, can you give us some concrete examples?
Let's look at... he starts off the book with a wonderful example. For the longest time, aluminium, or aluminum if you're American, aluminium was one of the most expensive metals out there. Not because it was scarce. Aluminium is the third most common element in the Earth's crust, but because we didn't know how to extract it from its ore, which is bauxite. But then in the mid-19th century, we discovered the process of electrolysis, and suddenly aluminium became abundant, and so abundant that we literally throw it away. We can manufacture as much aluminium as we like. So think of water. Water is scarce, or at least drinking water. 97.5% of the Earth's water is seawater. 2% of it is locked up as ice, and we are fighting over 0.5% of the fresh water out there. So imagine if we could come up with a technology that would produce clean water and abundant clean water, and think of what impact that would have for the human condition if we can do that. And the fact is, we've started making progress on that front. Has one of you read about what's the slingshot?
The
yeah,
slingshot,
exactly.
yeah. I mean, it's essentially a device, you could say, that's the size of a fridge. And what you can do is it can convert any sort of water into pure, 100% pure drinking potable water. And so what we're doing then is that we're taking, sources that could previously not be used and converting it into the all essential survival, drink that we need to survive. So really, and we're doing it with the amount of energy that it takes to use a hairdryer. So
I was reading that today, that of all things, in Peru, a most unlikely place, that they've devised a system that they're using a billboard that we see here in Dubai by the dozen. And this billboard, it's got a system built into it that simply takes the moisture in the air, captures it, and processes it and turns it into water. And there's tubes and things inside, and it's stored and then fed into a tap. So right there out in barren, arid, desert-like Peru, there's enough moisture in the air that this comes at, I think it's about 100 litres a day.
Wow.
That it doesn't seem an awful lot. But the entire thing only cost about $1,500.
Exactly.
Then you think, well, so cheap, and this is just taking moisture from the air in an environment that's not exactly high humidity to begin with.
Yeah.
So you think, well, if the technology is that simple, and as the guys rightly say, it's so much more cost-effective than desalination.
Exactly.
Why aren't we seeing more of it?
Yeah. I mean, the book is packed full of... Mehvash, you want to...
Yeah, I mean, another thing that we as humanity face as a big problem is energy. We need to realize that there's more energy in the sunlight that strikes the Earth's surface in an hour than all the fossil energy consumed in 1 year. So our big problem right now is figuring out a way not just to extract this energy, but to distribute it. Which brings me to a company called Aqueon Energy, a company that's based in California. And they're basically making these low-cost batteries for large-scale electricity storage. So we've got one side of the Earth that's sunny, and they're going to store all this energy and figure out a way to bring this to the darker side of the Earth. So these batteries are not like our everyday lithium-ion batteries that we use now. They're based on elements like sodium and water, which are so much more accessible and so much cheaper. And they can work on a larger scale. So what this company is aiming for is to allow some of the world's 1.4 billion people without electricity to get power without having to hook up to the electricity grid. I mean,
well, doesn't that, Chrissie, hook up exactly in our book of the week, Farishta, in Afghanistan, of creating the solar oven. That we have this in 1 hour we get more energy from the sun than we can consume in fossil fuels, and this is this huge untapped, largely untapped, barely scratch the surface of what we can do with solar energy. Other than the fairly obvious stuff of, I remember once in Africa recently had a garden hose coiled up on the roof and filled with water, and that was instant solar heating to create hot water.
So one of the things he also touches upon in the book is the sort of antagonistic approach people have towards the concept of abundance. The minute you mention that the future can be one of abundance, people get their backs up and people are skeptical and cynical. And he offers a few reasons for that. And one of the things he says is it's the confirmation bias. We tend to overwhelmingly pay attention to those pieces of evidence that only confirm the bias that we already have. And then there's anchoring. When you have a lot of evidence out there, you tend to focus only on the ones that you've already believed in the first place. So, for example, if you talk about the last century, the 28th century, and you try to convince them that it was one of the best centuries in the history of our species, people will immediately anchor on the Second World War. And they'll point out to the 60 million people who died and things like that. But at the same time, if you're being objective, you will have to admit that 90%, there was a 90% fall in infant mortality, 99% fall in maternal mortality, and 100% increase in our average human lifespan. Now that's something for us to celebrate about.
Exactly. I came across an interview with Peter Diamandis where he covers pretty much the same theme, and so that poverty has, in the past 50 years, has declined more than in the previous 500. The average, although the population has doubled, the average per capita income globally, even adjusting for inflation, has tripled. So the homicide rates are 100-fold less than they were 500 years ago. We're healthier, we're safer. And as he was posing the questions, that he'd overheard a young couple discussing whether or not it was morally responsible to bring a child into today's world, given the global challenges we face. Now that is a pretty tough philosophical poser, and he was answering it, and giving statistics like that. Well, what are you going on about? You're better off than you've ever been.
Exactly.
And he says that on the information side, and he takes this instance of, says, a Maasai warrior in Kenya on a mobile phone has better communications than the president of the nation did 25 years ago. And if they're on Google, they have access to more information than the president did just 15 years ago. So this is your average Maasai warrior, hardly Mr. Sophisticated, but he's got his mobile phone, and it works, and he's got access to all this information. So look, as he says, look at the tools and services that even the most ostensibly unsophisticated can access. This is a GPS locator, video telephone conferencing hardware and software, an HD video camera, a regular camera, a stereo system, a vast library of books, films, games and music. Go back 20 years and add the cost of these goods and services together, you'll get a total well in excess of $1 million. Today, they come free with your phone.
Exactly. He identifies some of the forces that will usher in this age of abundance, and one of the things he mentions is the rising billion. Mehvash or Faiza, do you want to talk about the rising billion?
So basically when he talks about the rising billion, he's talking about the world's poorest rising to pull themselves out of the slump that they're in. So they're not just going to sit around and wait anymore. They're going to find ways to innovate and to create something out of nothing, because we have all these resources at our hands. We just have to figure out a way to use them.
And that's the thing. So which is why our problem is now redefined. It's not about being scarce, because through all these examples we've identified, we're not facing the problem of scarcity anymore. It's a problem of accessibility. What we need to do is find a way to harness all the resources that we have so abundantly present around us. And that is the case with the rising billion. That is the case with the Maasai man that we just spoke about right now. It's not that we don't have the resources, or we don't have the energy, or we don't have the water. It's that we need to find a way to harness and access these points of energy and really utilize them in the most effective way possible.
Well, let's get back to that. It's a fascinating proposition. I think Peter Diamandis' book, Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think, there is an awful lot of food for thought in there, so stay with us and we'll be back with more after the break.
Dubai, famous for its Friday brunches. Now there are brunches, and then there's Bubblicious. For me to tell you how good it is would be pointless.
It's fantastic.
Unbelievable.
Overwhelming.
Outrageous.
Awesome.
Mind-boggling.
Cool.
Wow.
Spectacular.
Sensational.
Massive.
Quite an experience.
Exceptional.
Brilliant.
Great.
Bubbling.
Bubblicious.
Bubblicious. Experience it for yourself. Bubblicious. Fridays from 1 p.m. at the West in Dubai. Bookings essential. Call the West in Dubai 04 511 7136.
Celebrate Art Week on Dubai Eye 103.8. The chance to share artistic flair.
The 7th edition of Art Dubai takes place between March the 20th and the 23rd at Madinat Jumeirah. The fair features 75 galleries from 30 countries and showcases the works of over 500 artists. From live debates, musical performances, video installations, to talks and workshops for children. The Abraj Group Art Prize returns for a 5th year. This year featuring artists from Lebanon, Egypt, Pakistan and Syria, and they're working alongside the guest curator Murtaza Valley to create major new works. The artists will be unveiling their much anticipated works during Art Dubai. Laura Edgerton, Abraj Group Art Prize curator.
So the artists applied for projects nearly 8 months ago now and have been working busily on them, and so we see the results of these at the exhibition. And I must say there's an exciting range of media and scale and really some different elements that in the projects this year. It's exciting to have a photographer winner for really the first time since we had Hala Hakuzi back in 2010, so that's great to see Herez's work here at the fair again, and a lot of sculptural practice as well, which is a nice change for us.
And for the first time, there'll be an accompanying book which will be launched at the event, filled with new essays commissioned by writers and scholars in the region. The 7th edition of Art Dubai takes place between March the 20th and the 23rd at the Madinat Jumeirah. For more details, go to the website www.artdubai.ae.
You can also delve into the delights of Design Days Dubai and discover a world of creativity with bespoke collectible furniture and opulent objects. Dubai Eye 103.8 celebrates all things artistic as part of Art Week. To explore more, log on to designdaysdubai.ae.
From Jane Austen to George Orwell, this is Talking of Books in association with Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, only on Dubai Eye 103.8.
And welcome back to Talking of Books, and we're in our young readers slot with Rohan Roberts from Winchester School, and as always, stimulating, really deep thinking students. So Faiza and Mehvash discussing Peter Diamandis' Abundance, the future is better than you think. And before the break, we touched briefly on Diamandis' postulate that is it morally responsible to bring a child in today's world given all the global challenges we apparently face? So I think the best people to answer that are Faiza and Mehvash. What do you think? Would you rather be here now, or would you rather have been here 50 years ago or 100 years ago?
I don't even understand that question. I mean, I'd absolutely rather be here now because, sure, there are a few bad things, but what about the other millions of amazing things that are happening right now? I mean, just by reading Abundance, our eyes are open to this whole new world that we live in that we didn't even know about. I mean, all these amazing technological advances that can take us that one step further, and that's what Peter Diamandis is really trying to do, trying to open our eyes to see that, you know what, the future really is better than you think, and within the next few decades there are people and scientists and companies out there that are trying their best to make this a better world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to use a really simple example that I think everyone can connect with. Just yesterday, my mom was saying that she'd like to go back in the old days where she'd, buy a liter of milk every day from the farm and stuff like that. And my dad said, why? My children are studying halfway across the world in Australia, and maybe even 10, 15, 20 years ago from now, I wouldn't have dreamt of seeing them maybe more than once in my entire lifetime once they'd left. But today, I can switch on my laptop and I can Skype with them at, whenever I feel so, whenever I fancy. And I can take an airplane whenever I want. It's just everything is so accessible. Everything is so much more easy. It's so, I'm not saying that, there's anything wrong with the tough life. I'm just saying that I quite enjoy being in the generation that I am. I like knowing all these things, and I like having access to all the information that I want from the palm of my hand. I enjoy it. I love it.
Yeah.
So where do you think it will be? Certainly the old greybeards like me, Rohan to a lesser extent. Chrissie and I, certainly we even in our generation, we have seen such incredible transformation that would be that we were getting wide-eyed on colour television. It doesn't seem that long ago.
Yeah.
To have television at all.
Yeah.
A telephone even was a huge advance. As telephones, yes, there'd be one of the red boxes perhaps half a mile down the road that everybody used, but other than the doctor and the police station, few people had a telephone at home. I know, inconceivable as that might seem to you. Our grandparents, our parents even, would be looking at things of watching sport events from the other side of the world as they're happening live.
Yeah.
And getting pictures of this. As you say, concept like Skype or even international telephone at all.
Exactly.
When international telephones used to be booked the call maybe 2 days before, then you'd have to go to the operator and go crank, rumble, hello, connect to here to there, and perhaps 15 minutes later you'd get a scratchy, crackly, and it would cost you enormous amount of money for the privilege.
Yeah.
So
Diamandis makes
the pace of change is accelerating so much. That's something. How do you think that in 50 years' time, what will you be looking back on with the same amazement that Chrissie and I look back on when we were your age?
I don't know. So much has changed in just the past 5 years. The telephone, the idea of a mobile phone has changed drastically. I can touch the screen and and things happen, and so it has changed already so much. So obviously technology is growing at an exponential rate, as we could say. It's growing much faster than we can even conceive. So I'm I don't know. I'm hoping to see flying cars.
But I think maybe we need to talk about this concept of exponential growth, because Diamandis brings this idea of disruptive convergence, and he points out that our brain evolved in a local linear environment, but the world we live in, the reality we face now, is global and exponential. So what does it mean when we use the word exponential? If you took 30 linear steps, you'd be 30 meters away. But if you took 30 exponential steps, that's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, you'd reach 1 billion meters away. That's circling the globe 26 times. That's the rate at which technology is growing in the fields of genetics, robotics, nanotechnology, and neuroscience.
It's like the old story of the grains of rice on the chessboard.
Exactly.
Put one grain on square one,
exactly.
Put 2 grains on square 2, 4, and so on. How many grains of rice would you have when you cover all? And of course, more rice than the world has ever produced.
Yeah, exactly. And Diamandis is very close friends with this artificial intelligence guru named Ray Kurzweil, and Bill Gates calls Ray Kurzweil one of the best predictors of future technology. And one of Ray Kurzweil's predictions is that by 2029, we will have reverse engineered the human brain. Now, I don't know whether that will come true, but if you look at the rate at which brain mapping technology and the Human Brain Project that Obama has just funded is changing how we conceive or understand our brain, I'm not going to be too skeptical about this prediction.
No, I don't think we can afford to be skeptical about anything. In fact, the more improbable you can be to make the mental leap, it's more likely to be close.
Exactly.
As we have seen, the things that seemed impossible, far less improbable in the comparatively recent past, are now commonplace. So
yeah,
there is.
Having going back to John's story, grown up in a house that had no refrigerator, no washing machine, no telephone, no car, where does money figure in all of this?
Well, things are getting cheaper.
Yeah.
So if, for example, mobile phones were a luxury when they came out, but then technology makes it accessible to everybody, and things get cheaper and more accessible.
It's like we'd mentioned earlier. I mean, earlier you had different devices there. You had a camera, an HD camera, video streaming, computer, laptop, phone. Everything was different, and each had like an individual unit that you had to buy. But today, everything has become this one tiny iPhone. As an example, everything's become so much cheaper, and it's become, I'm not saying it's cheap, but I'm saying it has become cheaper.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this will continue to be the case. I'm sure that prices will continue to fall.
Yeah, Diamandis points out that the robber baron billionaires from 100 years ago, the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers, they didn't have access to what people living below the poverty line in America now have: flushing toilets, electricity, television, telephones. So technology will make things cheaper and more abundant in the coming years.
But I'm not totally sold on that. Because I think we still have hunger. There are people, thousands, hundreds of thousands of children going to bed hungry every night.
Yes.
Even in the developed world, there are people, believe it or not, who are still below the poverty line. Yes, they might have flushing toilets. They're comparatively, the gap between the rich and poor is widening, and the concentration of wealth, I think, goes way beyond the Carnegies and the Rockefellers of the concentration that you now have. If you had a Pareto principle of 20% of the people own 80% of the wealth, I think it now be more like 2% of the people hold 98% of the wealth. So I'm not wholly convinced that, yes, statistically, poverty, there's a lower rate of poverty than ever. Infant mortality is improving, but I don't think it's any cause for complacency.
Yeah. Oh no, not at all.
No, definitely not. And that's what we mentioned. We mentioned earlier as well that we do have our issues and we do have our problems. But my optimistic belief, especially after reading this book, is that we will knock them down. Why? Because our idea of poverty has changed in like the last 2 decades. Our idea of minimal education has changed in the last 2 decades. We are constantly raising our standards, and that's a good thing. But what I'm saying is that what we might consider poor today, tomorrow might not be so, because the ideas will keep changing. The concept of poverty will keep changing, because technology will keep improving and we'll keep having newer, better things that we believe are no more just a luxury but a necessity. And so if you don't have that, then you'd be considered poor. But, if we're looking at the general standard of living, I think it will keep getting better, and that's why standards will keep rising.
Yeah, and honestly, what Peter Diamandis keeps trying to point out in his book Abundance is that we're not just trying to make what he's trying to do is make this accessible to every person in the world. It's not just about selected areas, but about making it accessible to the entire world, so that we don't have that 1.4 billion people without access to clean water or without access to electricity. He's trying to give us insight into all these technologies that exist that will make it to every corner of the world and make sure that we are all on par or even higher, but nothing below.
Essentially, I think a quote from the book sums it up really well. This is what he said during his TED talk as well. Creating a life of abundance is not about creating a life of luxury for everybody on this planet. It's about creating a life of possibility for everybody on this planet. So we're not just looking at the luxury of life, but we're looking at possibilities. You can do whatever it is you want to do. And we need to give, these platforms will arise where you will be able to do this, and then you will no longer be held back by things such as poverty or not having an education or not having a roof above your head or not having clean water to drink.
Yeah, let's talk about education. And he touches on how education is now becoming abundant, and he mentions the Khan Academy. Mehvash, I know you use the Khan Academy.
Yeah, the Khan Academy technically started as this. He was a hedge fund analyst, if I'm not mistaken. His name was Salman Khan, and he started making video first he started tutoring his two cousins with math, and then he started creating video tutorials on YouTube. And the end result was that his cousins told him they preferred learning from him on YouTube rather than in real life. And that just puts everything in perspective, because once you think about it, they have that luxury to pause and stop and rewind and learn at their own pace. And once Khan understood that, he quit his job and he went full into expanding Khan Academy and making it this online amazing portal of free video tutorials that can reach out to any student in the world who wants to learn anything from biology to economics to maths to science. Like, it just goes, the list is endless. And the whole point is that instead of just one-size-fits-all lectures, it's everyone learning at their own pace. And it's accessible to everyone. And that's what technology is doing. It's making it accessible to everyone in every part of the world.
Yeah.
Well, that certainly is, to me, hugely encouraging. I didn't even know about the Khan Academy. Yeah. And presumably the lectures there are tailored to curricula in various places. Mm-hmm. So if you absorb what's available, you can write whatever exam might come up. And
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we'll probably see more of that. Chrissie, sorry.
Well, what that makes me think is potentially could happen is that once these individuals have got the qualifications, there'll be a massive brain drain from their countries. If their countries are poor, are classed as poor, and they can go elsewhere to earn better salaries, then the knowledge leaves the country. We see this here in our multinational community. We have a lot of very clever, knowledgeable people who've left their own countries in search of a better life for themselves.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of people may choose to stay as well. Not everybody can leave their country and move.
Well, it's time for a break again, but do stay with us as we explore the big ideas in Peter Diamandis' book, Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think.
On a typical morning, a mom in Dubai will dress in clothes bought from a mall in the UAE, make children's lunches with supermarket food, and drive them to a well-researched school in a large SUV. And during that whole time, she'll be listening to the radio.
The ARN Business Club can help you talk to mums and save you thousands on growing your business. Find out how at our free seminars from April 7th to 15th. Register at radiorsvp.com or text ABC to 4003.
Introducing Matala. Fly with Air Arabia to the second destination in Sri Lanka, Matala. With 2 flights a week starting from just 399 dirhams one way, all inclusive. Book now by logging on to airarabia.com from your computer, smartphone, or call us on 06 558 0000. Air Arabia. More than just low fares. Terms and conditions apply.
Life is busy, it's noisy, it's full on. There's always a hum. So for 1 hour, let's switch off. If we all do it, we can reduce the hum and reduce our carbon footprint. On Saturday the 23rd at 8:30 p.m, let's all switch off. Switch off your lights. Switch off the TV. For just 1 hour, even switch off the radio. Earth Hour, Saturday the 23rd at 8:30 p.m. Supported by TCOM and the Arabian Radio Network.
From Leo Tolstoy to Mark Twain, this is Talking of Books, in association with Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, only on Dubai Eye 103.8.
And welcome back to Talking of Books. But before we start up where we left off with Peter Diamandis, Abundance, I think time to give you one last refresher on the quiz questions. We're into our last half hour. And the questions were, quite simply, our first book based on our Book of the Week, Farishta by Patricia McArdle. The title, Farishta, where does it come from? And the clue is in the name of the central character, Angela Morgan. Text us in 4001 and you're in with a chance of winning your own copy of Farishta, and we rated it very, very highly. 8, 8.5, 9 were the 3 scores. And our second question, to win a mystery book. It's a signed copy of a book by one of the authors who starred at the Literary Festival a couple of weeks ago. And it's to do with our book champion slot when Leslie Cully took Peter James' series The Dead, always features in the title. And the central character there is a policeman who started off as a sergeant. I think he's now detective superintendent. What is the name of Peter James's policeman? Text us in 4001, and there is, it may well even be a Peter James book that signed by the author, but that's a mystery. But now back to the Peter Diamandis and Abundance, and our 2 young reviewers, Faiza and Mehvash, are very, very taken by it. I'm delighted that there is somebody, we have enough doomsayers around and Armageddon around the corner. He gives us a more optimistic view, but then I wonder, my sceptical old curmudgeon attitude, well, is he being too Pollyanna-ish? Rohan?
Short answer, no, because the book is packed full of evidence. He's actually talking about stuff that's happening right now that will make a difference. He's not making predictions about technologies that will arrive in the future. Exactly. There are things happening right now. And just to one of the forces that will usher in this age of abundance, he mentions, are the philanthropists. Someone like Bill Gates has started the Giving Pledge, and he's convinced 40 billionaires to give away the majority of their fortune to charity. So Bill Gates is working to eradicate malaria. Mark Zuckerberg is working to give education to people. There are other billionaires working to bring electricity and clean water to people. So all this is happening right now. We don't have to wait for the future. So I don't think he's being a Pollyanna, because he bases his stuff on actual evidence.
Yeah, exactly.
Chrissie, you looked as you've got profound comment coming up on it.
No, I'm just wondering where the current situation in Cyprus figures in all of this, with the banks and finances and people losing life savings, and the thing that's put it in my mind is the comment about your dad being able to get on an aeroplane and go anywhere he likes at any time, but for that you need money. And if you're at a stage in your life where you have limited funds, you've lost your life savings, maybe you have a small pension on which to live, but as food gets more expensive, that option won't be open to a lot of people. I'm sorry to sound negative, but I'm just trying to...
But see, it's still cheaper than air travel. International travel is cheaper than it's ever been.
Exactly.
That's one of the, again, we're all still the contribution to global warming, carbon footprint, etc. And that because air travel has become so cheap. Whereas before, even 25 years ago, perhaps even 20 years ago, it'd say that, well, it was a serious undertaking, save up for 2 years to buy a ticket to an overseas. Now, it's looked at as routine. Go online and check what cheap flight can I get from here to New York or Sofia or...
I agree, John, for people with a regular income. But like you and I, we're getting older. There's going to come a point where we don't have a regular income.
That's what children are for. They have to... I need payback, and having worked myself almost into an early grave to fund their education. Now they've got to keep me
paid in, so you're going to draw out.
Keep me beer and tobacco for the rest of my days.
Well, we're not going to have a utopia, I don't think, anytime soon. But the point Diamandis is making, that things are getting better. And say, for example, in the field of health and medicine, he talks about this device called Lab on a Chip. Can one of you talk about it?
Well, it's technically, it's called the LOC, as he said, the Lab on a Chip. And basically it can run tests that previously needed to be run in full-fledged labs, where obviously you needed a lot of funding, you needed space, money to test, for blood tests, etc., to find out whether a person has a certain disease or if he's sick. But now it can be done with this portable device called the LOC, and this is being sent out to, you can say, slightly underdeveloped countries where they don't have the opportunity or they don't have the infrastructure to run complicated lab tests. And so this device or this medical tool is being made more and more accessible to those countries that previously did not have that infrastructure or that technology to identify sickness in the people. So obviously it's helping, people who previously wouldn't even know why these people have passed away or why they've died. They had no way of diagnosing the problem, but today they do. And it's being made more and more accessible, and really easily so. And so obviously it's improving their health and it's improving the chances of their survival.
Provided there are facilities to treat whatever.
And then of course the more
lab tests identify.
Agreed. Yes. And this is being worked on in collaboration with the LOC. So the lab on chip.
And Bill Gates Foundation is working on this Cassava Plus project, in which they take cassava, which is how do you pronounce it? Is it cassava? Cassava, yeah.
Yes.
And it's a staple in many African countries. And what they're doing is they've genetically modified it to fortify it with all sorts of vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin E, iron, zinc, reduce the cyanide content, increase its storage. So presently you can store it for just 2 or 3 days, but they now modified it for it to be stored for over 2 weeks. So that is affecting in a positive way the health of millions of people in parts of Africa. So there's another reason to be optimistic on the food front.
But certainly, the stories like that encourage. Conversely, I'd look at, we spoke of the Maasai warrior in Kenya, but one of the sad stories to me out of there is that Kenya is earning a lot of income from growing table flowers and exporting them. And well, why? The amount of water that is consumed for every kilo of flowers that you deliver, you're exporting 3 kilos of water from the moisture content to the water that was used in horticulture, when water is such a rare, sparse commodity, and could be used more practically to and find alternative export products. So the logic of that just defies belief, other than presumably that it can mean now you can buy your wife Valentine's flowers or salve your conscience a lot more cheaply than you would if the flowers were grown in the same country where they bought.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, we will still continue to hear some of these crazy stories, but on the whole, I think the direction the human species is progressing towards is a positive one. I think we can be excited about the future. And one of the things the book inspired for us at the Winchester School is we started this movement called the Intelligent Optimism. And if you go to intelligentoptimism.com, you'll see our mission statement. And the idea is to use the students to spread this message that yes, our species is guilty of terrible things, but we're also an incredibly creative, cooperative, innovative and inventive species capable of great things if we set our mind to it. And the students hold workshops for their peers and their teachers to try and spread this idea of being optimistic about the future. Because in some cases that can even become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you look at the newspapers are full of negative stories. We did an activity where we got all these local newspapers and used a red highlighter to strike out all the negative news, and then we made an estimation and found over 80 to 90% of the news was bad or negative or depressing. And to think that these children are seeing this negative news every single day of their life, that must have some sort of impact on their psyche. So we need to find some way to reverse this and give them access to positive information, positive news.
Yeah, I mean, that's what baffles me. Like, why aren't we hearing about the slingshot in our newspapers? Why aren't we hearing about all these alternative energy technology using devices that exist now? Why aren't we hearing about all the things that Peter Diamandis listed out in abundance, things that exist and are being developed, and some people are aware of it, but why not everyone?
Vested interests.
Yeah.
Vested interest, certainly.
And also,
again, there's an overlap there with Farishta, our book of the week earlier, where the Angela Farishta is asking the Russian ambassador, consul, whatever he was, what went wrong? Well, if you were working, the Russians of all people are working so hard in Afghanistan to create sustainable job creation, solar energy, infrastructure. What happened to vested interests?
And also I think it's a little more simple than that, at least in terms of newspapers. Like Diamandis points out, newspapers tend to go with the idea if it bleeds, it leads. So people are more interested in negative news than positive news. Doesn't seem
that's John being a newspaper man.
We're coming up to a break that stops us exploring that one a bit in the detail it needs, but yes, after the break, stay with us and we'll look at that. Why, if it bleeds, it leads. Why do newspapers and why do media survive on bad news?
Yeah.
If the road had a favorite car, it would be the BMW 3 Series. Highly innovative, sporty, elegant, comfortable and safe. And with a starting price of only 109,000 dirhams for the BMW 316i, we're sure it'll become your favorite too. Visit any of AGMC's showrooms or call 04 339 1555 for more information. And to book a test drive, register at testdrive@agmc.ae. Valid while stocks last. Terms and conditions apply.
Life is busy, it's noisy, it's full on. There's always a hum. So for 1 hour, let's switch off. If we all do it, we can reduce the hum and reduce our carbon footprint. On Saturday the 23rd at 8:30 p.m, let's all switch off. Switch off your lights. Switch off the TV. For just 1 hour, even switch off the radio. Earth Hour, Saturday the 23rd at 8:30 p.m. Supported by TCOM and the Arabian Radio Network.
If you could speak Japanese, how would you say brunch and convey the true meaning of authentic Japanese offerings, from tempura to teppanyaki and all the exciting flavors that redefine classic Japanese cuisine? Every Friday till late afternoon in a wonderfully vibrant setting. Armani Hashi. It's how you say brunch in the Japanese language of style. For reservations, call 04 888 3444.
From Jane Austen to George Orwell, this is Talking of Books in association with Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, only on Dubai Eye 103.8.
And welcome back to Talking of Books. And just before the break, we were touching on why does bad news sell? If it bleeds, it leads. It's always been a mantra in the business. So the the shock, horror, tragedy will always be the front page news. Because why? People, whether you like it or not, that's what sells newspapers. And we have to look at why does it sell newspapers? And strangely enough, we echo back to another book of the week. Chrissie, remember a couple of weeks ago, we did The Chimp Paradox by Steve Peters,
I was just thinking about
was
that.
another festival author. And he, Chimp Paradox, in a nutshell, is simply that we've all got our inner chimp, which is what he calls the amygdala, that is atavistic conditioning, our flight, fight, or freeze response, but usually, sees danger everywhere. And he calls this the chimp. As it's his model of explaining how the brain works. If you've got your chimp, you've got your human, you've got the computer, and the amygdala or the temporal lobe is the chimp. So Diamandis follows the pretty much same theme, but at a slightly different angle, and says that this is responsible for our primal emotions, rage, hate, and fear. It's an early warning system. Yeah. The organ is always on high alert, and its job is to find out anything in the environment that could threaten our survival. So once the amygdala is turned on and it's scanning all the time for threat, it's just about impossible to shut off. And this is precisely what Stephen Peters was telling us, the chimp paradox. That yes, it is there, it helps us survive. The paradox is that it also inhibits or impedes our rational, analytical thought process. So Diamandis points that we're saturated with information. We've got millions of news outlets competing for our attention. And how do they compete? They compete by vying for the amygdala's attention, and hence any information that when we're looking for danger, yes, we're feeding a fiend. Again, Peters, the chimp. Yep. We're throwing the chimp another banana. Bad news sells because the amygdala is always looking for something to fear.
Right.
So it happens time and time again, this program, Chrissie, that we have overlap and crossover from different books. This one, as he says, it's our early warning system. When threats were of the tiger in the bush variety. Things have changed. Many of today's dangers are probabilistic. The economy might nosedive. There could be a terrorist attack. The amygdala can't tell the difference. Yeah. But threat. So you're now on red alert.
Yeah.
So as he says, impossible to avoid media, as we're now being bombarded with information from all directions. And it's continually scaring us in an attempt to gain market share. So the brain gets convinced that it's living in a state of siege, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah. Well, just touching on the subject of information, perhaps we could look at how much information we're generating just to give an idea of scale. And Diamandis points out that from the beginning of time till 2001, we generated 2 exabytes of digital information. Between 2001 and 2010, we've been generating 5 exabytes of information every 2 days. And by the end of 2013, we'll be generating 5 exabytes of information every 5 minutes. So that's the amount of information we're bathed in. And to some extent, I'm thrilled about it because I crave information. I want to know things, and that's the difference between being alive now and being alive 20 years ago. I have access to all the information I want, and so that's exciting. But now it has implications on education. How do we educate students in an environment where they have access to information at the touch of at the slide of a screen or the touch of a screen? You know.
Yeah.
So what's it like for you being in school where you probably have access to more information than your teacher has in her brain?
Wouldn't be too difficult.
I mean, yeah, it's an interesting time to be studying. Really, it's you're just constantly learning, and you know, of course, I'm your regular student, in school using an iPad, and, of course, it's in addition to my regular education. But in this book, Abundance, he mentions an example of, you can say, an experiment that's been running for about, I think, close to 10 years now, and it's called the hole in the wall. And it's being conducted by a gentleman called Sagatha Mitra. And he just recently won the TED Prize. And he won this because the basic idea of the experiment was to create a little hole in the wall and stick a computer in it and just leave it there. And see the kind of response that he can get from young kids.
Slum dwellers mostly.
Slum dwellers mostly, exactly. And what's interesting is the location that he chose to put the computers in. And that was mostly slums and places with not too many schools around. And so these were essentially children who probably didn't even speak the language in which the computer programs were running. And so he left the computer there for some time, and he came back after a couple of weeks, and he just, he stood there and he watched. And the result was that these children were now happily playing games and using that machine as if they'd been born with it. And it's just so easy to get used to this.
They taught themselves.
To this, they taught themselves. They used it, and they got used to it, and they experimented, and they discovered, and they taught themselves. So that was just incredible.
What we need to encourage is students to take their learning into their own hands, because they can. This experiment has actually proved that students can take their learning into their own hands. So who knows, teachers will be redundant in another 10 years. I'll be out of a job.
Abundance goes against all the things that we are taught. The first lesson of economics that we have at IGCSE year 10, we learned that the main economic problem is scarcity. But here we are reading that, nothing is scarce. Everything is in abundance. We just have to figure out a way to use it. So it just goes against what we're studying right now.
This explosion of information, is it new information and information that's always been around, but it's now accessible? For example, I've still got a 20-volume set of Britannica next to me. I know, the girls laugh. And a very well thumbed set of Britannica. As in years ago, there was no Mr. Google to give you instant answers. So I'd be writing or researching something. Where to go? Haul out Britannica, and I'd have 6 different volumes of Britannica open at different pages. And bit of this, bit of that. Now I go click, 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 and I've got it in one go. The Britannica sits there, and it looks quite impressive. But when was the last time any of the volumes got pulled out?
I haven't touched a paper dictionary in 10 years now, because I have apps that can give me the meaning of a word in an instant. I don't go to a book dictionary. But the question, just to answer your question, yes, a lot of it is new information, because there's so much discovery, so much research being done in the field of science and cosmology and medicine, and all this is now accessible. So it's new information being generated and being digitized and being put on the web for everybody in the world to access.
Well, I think we have to be simply a lot more careful and decide, that is relevant, that's important,
Exactly.
I need to know. All this cosmology, and it's there in infinite detail. It's survived without it up till now. I don't think it'll make a huge difference. If I was an expert, fantastic, and I needed access to all that source. I've now got it. Whereas before I'd probably need to go on a fellowship to some and have access to the Bodleian University or MIT or whatever it might, Bodleian Library I should say, or MIT or whatever it might, the information's available. Now, yes, it's there in a touch of an app on your phone.
And what we need to teach children is to distinguish between information, misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. I think one of the reasons for the Arab Spring, the revolution, was the people had access to information. They could communicate with each other, and the governments couldn't continue to lie to them. So we need to teach students to be wary about propaganda and filter out what is good information, what's misinformation.
Well, I think that's always nothing new there.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just that there's so much more information now that you can't blindly believe whatever you read on the internet. You can't just say, "Oh, I read it on the internet."
well, exactly. It's always red light flashing. There is no quality kite mark on the internet that you can rely on it or you can't.
And the internet also gives us opportunities to collaborate now. It allows for people from different countries with disparate personalities to come together and collaborate. So Wikipedia, I mean, the idea sounds preposterous that people around the world will edit an online encyclopedia, but it works. I mean, if you go to Wikipedia, for the most part, you get accurate information, and it's amazing that.
Well, I think now that there is a filter on the thing, you can't just go on there and add whatever you like. That they've got the introduced a layer.
Even if you do, it's down in like
unfortunately, we could go on all afternoon on this, but we're rapidly running out of time, almost news bulletin time and quiz answer time. And Farishta, for winning a copy of Farishta by Patricia McCardle. Farishta, of course, was Dari for Angel, with Angela being the central character. Lots of people got it right. Sheila's name came out of the electronic hat, so well done, Sheila. A copy on its way to you. Peter James's character is, of course, Roy Grace, Leslie Cully's book champion choice. Lots of people got that right, and Roger's name came out of the hat. So that is us for another week, and it's thank you to our guests today, to Leslie Cully as co-host and book champion, Chrissie Searle as our lead reviewer, and in our final hour, yet again to Rohan from Winchester, and to Mehvash and Faiza giving us an absolutely fascinating hour on Peter Diamandis, and we do look forward to having you back before long if you can choose books like this and talk with such enthusiasm and animation. You really made our show today. So from me, John McDonald, thank you for listening, and we'll be back same time next week with more Talking of Books.
The future really is better than
Last week on the Business Breakfast. The Business.
Trevor McFarlane, senior economist at the Economist Intelligence Unit, about what was in George Osborne's red briefcase. Austerity measures to continue in the UK. Were there any real surprises for you in that budget?
Not so much. It was really about moving the deck chairs around, fiddling at the edges. It wasn't any real kind of substance behind the announcement. It's like a budget anywhere around the world. Politicians are very similar all around the world. Basically, what Osborne wanted to, the spin he wanted to put on this was, he called it a budget for an aspiration nation.
The banter.
I was very, very pleased for your home country when I read that.